Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and in a few moments, we're going to be joined by Jackie, Diana, and Alan, the book club guy, because this is part 2 of our Crucial Conversations book club, wrapping up Supervision September. If you missed last week's episode, or you're not a member of our Patreon at the $10 and up level, well, go back to last week's episode, because we are going to be referring to our discussion of the book Crucial Conversations. And if you didn't hear part 1, some of part 2 is going to be a little confusing and feel very disjointed. So we recommend you go back and listen to that episode, then come back and listen to this one. For those of you on our Patreon, at our premium level, you had the whole thing in one fell swoop. For everyone else, please enjoy part 2 of our Crucial Conversations book club. All right. So we've got the stage set. We know we're prepared to have our Crucial Conversations. We are prepared to sort of do our own reflection. Now it's time for some action. We're going to talk about part 2, how to open your mouth, which I didn't love as the title of a part. It seemed a little, I don't know, condescending. But in any case, that brings us to our next chapter, Learn to Look. And again, if you're at the end of the book, you wanted to skip ahead to see how it ends, this is one of the second kind of big take-homes. This Learn to Look chapter, I think this is kind of one of their big take-homes, and relates a lot to our, or the author's idea of mastering your own story, or recognizing your own story.
I liked how it's like opening your mouth, because that's what you're going to start doing. So because like right when you're going to, I know that I'm like being such a jerk to you today, but I don't mean to, but,
well, that's the story I'm telling myself right now, Jackie. Jaggie's a jerk. She's trying to make me look bad to the podcast audience.
I'm not, though. It's both of, that's your opinion, right? And this is my opinion, that I like this part because when you have a conversation, the moment that you start speaking is the moment that things can go horribly wrong or horribly right. I could say one word and I could make the entire conversation unsafe, right? And so that's why I like that part. I mean, yeah, it's kind of cheesy, right? Because I, again, don't like the tone and the style. But I get where they're coming from, because I could say one thing and then I could totally screw up the entire conversation right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Or not. I go, and then screw it up.
And I think that the previous chapter and this chapter both, they don't really say it, but we always hear about watch your always and your nevers. Mm. Like, this is...
That is me.
Yeah, like that is a very important thing, both for your private conversation, your personal private conversations, as well as your supervision conversations, and how like you have to watch like that in the CPR, a way that, is it really a pattern, or are you just aggravated and saying always and never? Like, do they always do it? And even if they do you want to have that come out of your mouth and completely put them on the defensive about this behavior? So
this is me in a nutshell. I am the always and never girl. When I get into a fight with someone or I'm getting into an argument, that is the first place I go to. Like, you always do this. And so it has not worked well for me. And I haven't gotten into I don't do it at work because I don't get in that sort of fight at work, right? But in my personal life, I do. And I haven't gotten into a fight recently, luckily for me. But when I do, and I'm starting to have these types of conversations, I am going to be very careful about my always and nevers, because it's very rarely the case.
Mm-hmm. So this chapter is a lot about, like we're saying, sort of just looking for cues that signal safety in a conversation. Because as much as it is a tough conversation, that doesn't mean it needs to be an unsafe conversation. Because if the other parties feel unsafe, they're not going to engage in the crucial conversation. It no longer meets the criteria really for a meaningful crucial conversation. So it really has a lot to do with sort of paying attention to those nonverbal cues, or potentially verbal cues, that are signaling that somebody is upset, somebody feels uncomfortable. They could be, they could look like they're going to throw up. They could be raising their voice or pointing their finger. And it just showing these signs of what they call fearfulness. And this leads to the idea that a lot of times in our conversations, we are going to, if we set up unsafe situations or we don't attend to unsafe situations, we're leading our conversation partners to respond, and then potentially ourselves to respond with, and we've said this term a couple times, but it's time to define it, silence or violence, which those are good. I think that those, they rhyme, they really get across, I think, the point of what they're looking for. So I'm going to give you the definitions from the book. So when we're talking about a silent response, it's the act of an individual, so any act to purposefully withhold information from the pool of meaning. So it's some sort of an avoidance technique. That could be, I'm only selectively showing my true opinion, I'm being sarcastic, I'm sugarcoating my responses. Could be actual avoidance, I'm physically just, I'm verbally changing the topic. Or it could be actually physically withdrawing. I'm just going to leave. I won't be a part of this conversation. And then the violence being any verbal strategy that attempts to convince, control, or compel others to your point of view. So those were quotes. I have the page numbers, but they're in the second edition. So you may be out of luck if you try to find them in the third edition, exactly the right page. But that's when your goal is sort of to win. My pool is the pool of meaning. So you start trying to coerce others by forcing your views. You dominate a conversation. You're cutting people off. You're speaking in absolutes. Alan, the always and never that you brought up would be good examples of that. You're labeling people to try to sort of dismiss them, but this could be a very easy place where you are engaging in, racist. I was going to say subtly racist, but I was even overtly kind of racist or stereotyped thinking to try to sort of cow the other individual, or just flat out attacking, threatening people. Going even beyond that, actually threatening people or belittling other individuals. And they give you a little test that you can actually take, some true false questions to find your style under stress. So not only knowing that you could set up a stage for people to be silent or violent to you, but when you're in a crucial conversation where someone's not paying attention to your signs of safety, how might you respond? Did anyone take the test to see what their style was under stress?
I did not need to take it.
I did.
What were you, Jackie?
Diana's avoidant.
Yeah, I didn't need to do that test.
Okay. Jackie, what'd you come out as?
I came out as controlling, not surprising.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm violence and attacking, not surprising.
Well, I think if people just know you from the show, they're like, Jackie, she's so fun, she's so funny. But I think people who know you and love you very much would say, oh, no, Jackie's going to be the violence of the two of these. No way.
Oh, yeah, 100%, right? No, it's so true. I was like, yep, oh, yeah. I looked at it before I took the test, and I guessed that I would be controlling and attacking.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was right when I took the test.
I was surprised for someone who spends a lot of time talking into a microphone. I was actually more of the silence. My responses tend to be a little more silence than violence for stressful situations.
No, Rob, you and I we have our differences, but you and I are definitely maskers, sugarcoating it and using sarcasm and probably avoiding because it's hard to withdraw. Mm-hmm. It really is. But I think that makes sense. Yeah. That's definitely where I fall.
It's usually we talk about how all the things we have in common now, and we usually come to, we're such silent responders of stress. It's our common. I
like, Rob, that you were like, yeah, that's totally Jackie.
I know you so well, Jackie. How many years now? Long time.
I know. I love it.
It's only as I've come to know Jackie this summer through socializing with her that I've realized that that's the case. Mm-hmm. Not because she's done it to me, but because she's been talking about herself. We were talking about personality traits, and one of the things we talked about, she was like, "Oh no, that's definitely me." And I'm like, "Really? That's who you like? You're like that? Okay, I guess I can see it."
Yeah.
So, and if you want to get where they have it's 31, 32 questions that get into not just are you silence or violence as your stress type in these crucial conversations, but they break it down by chapter too. So if you want to get into the nitty gritty, again, how reliable a test is this? We don't know. But if you want to sort of look at what are the chapters that I need to focus on. So if you're like, I listen to the podcast and I want to read the book, but I only have time for one chapter. Well, you take this test in chapter 6 of the third edition, and you will know which chapter you should read first.
Like a Cosmo quiz.
Yeah.
Silence or violence.
So one thing I was a little bit sad about is that this happened in this chapter. I would have really liked to see it at the end. as like a summary.
Oh, yeah, the test itself, yeah.
Yeah, I would have loved to see figure 6.1, which is like the what are you in this chapter, but then 6.2, your dialogue skills score at the end, because then it's like, oh, you've read this book. Here are the places that you really should go back and like focus on if you just have to reread something again. That's kind of, I was a little bit disappointed when I looked at, I was like, where's the rest of the questions? And I turned the next page and I was like,
Yeah, and they're on chapters you haven't read all the chapters yet.
Yeah.
So the context might be missed. Yeah, maybe they could have split it into the style under stress versus the actual dialogue skills as individual things.
That's how I had seen it. But
I do think that this is helpful, even if you maybe already sort of intuited your own style going into the quiz, to read through the quiz so you can see, because they're basically giving you like little operational definitions, right, of different ways that people might be reacting under these stressful conversations. So there might be some in there that you don't recognize in yourself, but seeing them written down could assist you in recognizing if someone else is starting to respond in that way, right? So as behavior analysts, they should be like right up our alley, right? If we are observing how the other person is responding, potentially in really subtle ways. It could be small shifts in like facial, what are those called?
Cues?
Facial, I don't know. Expressions, facial expressions, or body posturing, or the ways in which they're responding, even if they're still saying the same thing, but they're not saying it the same way, right? Those subtle changes in response could be really big indicators to us that something's not right in this conversation and that the conversation partner does not feel safe in the conversation, and we need to re-rudder the boat. Nautical.
That's a good nautical term.
And I felt that it was unfortunate because they don't really address this, that if you have somebody who is perhaps neurodivergent of some form or another, I'm just going to say in my experience, part of the reason that I'm a masker and avoider and withdrawer, and that it is a history of having a lot of people who were violent and how that they had these crucial conversations with me, a lot of insensitivity. And so if you do have someone that you're supervising who is identified strongly with the withdrawing, avoiding, and masking, one thing that they don't talk about in this book is you should probably be aware that they may have other issues, other history, learner history at play, and this may be difficult. And you even pointing out the fact that, well, you're just masking. You need to stop doing that. That's not a good way to have a crucial conversation. It's probably not helpful. In fact, it's probably just going to make them not want to be your supervisee.
Yeah.
And so I just felt it was kind of a missing portion of this section, that violent communicators, as it were, probably really cause a lot of silent communicators in this context. And that...
I 100% agree with you, Ellen. Since I am a violent communicator, I used to take silence as compliance. Like, oh yeah, they agree with me now because they're not talking, right? And so this book really helped me kind of relook at those types of things.
They said, sounds good, and they ran away. And you said, man, they're just so excited to do what I said.
Did it, they right?
If I'm silent, that usually means I do not agree with you.
Yeah. And I think it was really that phrase masking. At first I was like, well, I feel like they've appropriated this term that has a specific meaning. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, no, like in this context, it really is the same thing. And that I'm not contributing to the crucial conversation because I'm not revealing truths about how I feel or how I want to respond. They don't flesh it out very well, but so you could maybe miss that because not everyone who masks does it through sarcasm, sugarcoating, or couching it in other terms. But again, if you in that framework of withholding information from the pool of meaning, and then quite frankly, people get to do it if they want to. Like it may be a barrier to how they communicate, and you should help them find ways to get around it, which may take more work than what this book lets you do. But that really struck me as like, this is important, but there's a big missing piece of like the silence has context and learner history behind it.
Yeah, and some of it too might be, Alan. I think I'm hearing you in terms of I mostly read this book in terms of how would I have a good crucial conversation? How would I model crucial conversation? But I didn't spend a ton of time thinking about how would I go back and maybe try to teach or analyze crucial conversations as much. Like maybe that would be kind of a nice additional section or again, something to kind of look at in terms of, the supervisor, supervisee role. Like there might be a context where you do talk about, hey, let's talk like just kind of like we've been doing. Let's talk about your stress under style. What might that mean? Which of these steps do you think might help you? Like make it a reflective activity to do with a supervisee. That might be a piece that, that could make that a little more coherent or cohesive. Perhaps I don't know if we necessarily get everything, but might give us some extra pieces that we could use to sort of improve the skill without just being in a conversation and then doing a feedback or doing a reflection after a crucial conversation.
And to say in the next chapter, they talk about, safety involves mutual purpose and mutual respect. So like they do address it in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
But they don't do it quite as head on as I would have liked.
Well, let's talk about that chapter. So you've recognized safety is out the window. So what do? Well, go on to the next chapter. We're not going to tell you yet. You have to go to the next chapter to learn how to make it safe. Now, they talk about, of all their observations, most of the time when people recognize that they might not be making it safe, they find a lot of people just naturally, when they pay close attention to that, tend to make it a little safer. However, I think it's best to assume that when we're not making things safe, there are some steps that we should be taking. Just assuming, I have to make sure I make it safe, doesn't necessarily mean you have made it safe. But you might get lucky in terms of paying close attention. And the authors tell you this, that if you pay attention to safety as something you care about, odds are you might engage in some of these making it safe behaviors pretty naturally without a lot of additional practice and training. But hey, you should always practice and train on new skills, regardless of whether you might get lucky and not have to. And again, like you said, Alan, that first condition of safety is having a mutual purpose. So making it clear to your partners, that the goal of the conversation is to reach a common outcome that everyone is happy with, that everyone has built on in that kind of that mutual pool, that you care about the goals, they care about the goals, and that there are some shared value involved. But again, if you're seeing signs of unsafety or unsafe or safety being removed from the conversation, the question you want to ask yourself is, am I saying the words, but my partner doesn't trust my motives here? Part of that might be asking yourself, is there a mutuality in my purpose? Again, we're going to go back to Carnegie in terms of the idea of, if it doesn't work for both of you, this mutual purpose, if you ask yourself and say, what I am trying to do is get my way, that's really my goal here, there will never be a mutual purpose. You cannot create safety in your crucial conversation, and you're going to need to exit it and kind of come back to it, or you're going to need to find a mutual purpose within the conversation. But ideally, you already have one, and you can kind of come back to it. Again, you go back to heart, you go back to your main motive, and you can sort of focus on that. You can make sure that you are showing respect for the individual, even if you don't agree with them, but that you are kind of honoring their basic humanity, that you are here to work on something to reach a mutual purpose together. And that hopefully the thing that's being disagreed on is the strategy. How will you reach the purpose? Not that there is a purpose that you both care about. And then they give some
steps.
You're
saying all that stuff out loud. It's not just like,
yes,
I'm thinking it in my head about what the mutual purpose is, but I'm actually stating it to my conversation partner.
Yes. Ideally, that helps everything, recreates a sense of safety. And if you're noticing the person, they're putting their arms down, they're breathing again, they're starting to talk to you. Okay, great. You probably recreated a safe environment. If they haven't, some other suggestions they give are you could decide whether you need to apologize, engage in contrast, or the mutual purpose doesn't exist and you've now got to create or rebuild a mutual purpose for the rest of the conversation. Were there any of these three that, jumped out at any of you as like, yes, that's the one that I've been trying to work on, or that's the one that's the most valuable, I think, to me as a practitioner, as a learner?
Are we looking at the crib analogy? Acronym?
No, not crib yet. Or was crib one that jumped out at you? Or did it jump out at you in that you're tired of acronyms and you didn't want to learn a new one? Crib had to do with when you're creating mutual purpose. That is a component of these. So this is an acronym within a list. I'm getting a look.
Oh,
I don't think Crucial Conversations discussion has created safety.
I'm thinking I liked the one I liked use contrasting.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that seems to be really helpful. That's something that you could practice every single day. And what that is clarifying it, like saying what you think they think, and then clarifying it to what you actually think. Right? They say, I'd like to talk to you about something that's worrying me, and I'm honestly not sure how to handle this conversation. My fear is that I'll draw down on our relationship, and that's not my intent. You see the contrasting? It's the opposite. My goal is bringing this up to strengthen our relationship. So contrasting, I think, would be really helpful because you are demonstrating that you see what they're going through, or that you've listened to what they're saying, but then you're saying, okay, that's actually not what I meant, so I'm going to clarify my intention. Yeah. And then I also liked the committing to creating and recreating that mutual purpose. Because I think a lot of the times, if I'm going to have a crucial conversation or something that's going to be challenging, I have what I want my end goal to be, right, and how I want the conversation to go. But I rarely talk to my supervisees about what they want out of this conversation. So I think starting there would be really I think it would be a nice way, and maybe awkward initially for supervisees, right? Because it's not typically how we have those types of meetings. But like, what do you want to get out of this meeting today? Here's what I want to talk about. How do you think we should get there? And I think that would be a nice way to bring, a conversation in.
Do you want to be a BCBA?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Mass. to get your graduate degree.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education.
Dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster's certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years. And our 2017 grads had a 100% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy practicum placement support, ethics mini handbooks, PhD-level professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland.
If interested, don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu, regiscollege.edu. One more time, www.regiscollege.edu.
See you there!
Hey everyone, sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure everyone gets their first secret code word for our episode. Again, for listeners to ABA Inside Track, we are ACE and QABA approved. And by listening to our episode, you are able to earn CEs, in this case, a Supervision CE. You need to finish listening to the episode, then go to our website, abainsidetrack.com/getCEUs. That's GET-CEUS, and find this episode. Alternately, you can just go to the notes section of your podcast player and click on the link at the bottom of that section. It'll take you right to that page and enter in 2 secret code words. The first one is mead. M-E-A-D. It's an ancient drink of honeyed wine or honeyed beer. It's, it's kind of an acquired taste if you've never had it. It's kind of interesting. You can find it in many stores. Give it a try if you haven't. And if you don't want to, just have some honey. It's delicious. But the code word is mead. All right, back to our discussion. With the idea of creating mutual purpose, that one was my least favorite, not so much because I didn't like it or agree with it, but because it felt like it did not get as much discussion time in the book as I think it would need to do it very well. Like they have this great example of creating mutual purpose of a crucial conversation between two spouses. One is going to get a promotion, but they have to move across the country. And the other one is not happy with it, but knows that there won't be a job if they don't take that job. And they kind of exemplify what they mean by, sort of the discussion of that. The acronym they give is CRIB. So like you said, Jackie, starts with the committing a sequel mutual purpose, recognizing there's a purpose behind the steps of the strategy that's going on. If you can't do that, you have to invent a mutual purpose and brainstorm new strategies. And I felt like that inventing a mutual purpose and brainstorm new strategies, like that example of when they shared that example, I was like, man, what would this couple do? Well, they're going to get a divorce. This is going to be terrible. There's no way they can. And they sort of got into, but the values, they talked about their values, and their values were having community jobs. So maybe the problem isn't how do I work this job across the country and still see my family, but it's I should switch to a job that allows me to work in the community. And I was like, wow, that is a great solution. I never in a million years would have thought of it. And if I were asked to be in a conversation of this level of cruciality, where I had to invent a new purpose, I think I would have failed. Or I think I would have gone into silence and like, I guess you're just going to have to move across the country and I'll only see you once a month and I'll take care of the household by myself and our 7 rambunctious children and it's okay. But it's
that
not
sounds
okay.
super passive aggressive, doesn't
Exactly.
it?
That's what I would do. I wouldn't have done the I and the B. I wouldn't have been like, well, let's talk about our values. We love the community. I don't. So I really wanted more in that section because I feel like if I got to a crucial conversation like that, maybe it's rare enough that they didn't expect most of the audience to need to, but I didn't feel like I had the wherewithal. Whereas apologies and contrasting, here's my don't statement and my do statement. I'm sorry, here's why, and here's how I'm going to change it. Like those, yeah, I get that. I can do those too.
Or the example about the couple that one of them wanted to go out for their date night and one of them wanted to stay home, right? But they realized that their ultimate value was just that they could spend time together. And then they just compromised and did with the wife.
I think there might have been some silence in that conversation.
Jake. I liked contrasting too. I feel like that is a really useful skill. And it's not something that you can automatically just do, right? You have to kind of practice what that sounds like. And so that you can do it in a way that's genuine and really is taking into consideration how the other person might be thinking. You got to do some perspective taking in order to kind of get that right. But it's a really useful skill in these crucial conversations.
Yeah.
Like I'd like to talk to you about your car's extended warranty. You might think that I'm just approaching you to try to get more money from you, but actually, I am really worried about you and your family's safety.
Well, I don't have a relationship with you, car salesman, so all this ain't gonna work.
I was like, Diana, I thought you weren't going to get into this today.
Go back to chapter. Go back to chapter 3, car salesman. You got a ways to go.
All right, chapter 8.
So we've got safety. We're recreated safety. The next couple chapters get kind of back into the idea of the stories of how do you, and I did kind of like this format of the book. Okay, so now you've created a safe environment. You've made it clear there's a mutual purpose, or you've developed a mutual purpose. How do you still advocate for yourself, and add from your mutual pool in a meaningful way where you're not just going back on your old kind of tricks and removing safety or going to violence or going to silence. So, how can you do that? And again, they reiterate, well, start with safety. Make sure you keep coming back to safety. Have I created safety while I'm advocating for myself? Am I still also maintaining safety? Have I started enough with heart that I have a clear motive that I can keep coming back to? And then they use the state. So when they say state your path, guess what? It's an acronym, folks. State. The acronym. You want to state your facts. And this is kind of a what skill. Don't talk about kind of your emotions behind, why you're going to do what you're going to do, but sort of focus on observably. These are the things that I am seeing. These are the things that are happening. These are the things that we want to focus on or we want to resolve. But start with facts. And again, presenting facts not in order to win a debate, but sharing facts just to get across the meaning. This is kind of where I'm coming from. This is a sort of what it is that I would like us to be talking about. And ideally, you want to do this before the conversation. This is another one that comes before the conversation. So if you don't have the facts that you're going to want to come into when you advocate to add your meaning, try to get those facts ahead of time rather than trying to think of them in the middle of the conversation, because that's when you're probably going to focus on non-observables, emotional states. Now that you have your facts out, now you can share a story of your own. You can share a conclusion in a neutral and reasonable way. So instead of it being, and that's why you're the worst employee in the world, it can be, and I'd like to discuss this so we can come up with a solution related to your tardiness in completing your assessments, or having missed deadlines on these assessments. Again, as factual as possible. Again, you're going to want to keep that safety eye, but there's your T in state. Then you would ask for others' paths, because again, if the goal is really to expand that pool of meaning, you want to hear what the other person has to say. So this is where I'm coming from, but I'd like to hear other people's ideas. You then talk tentatively. So using phrases like, I was wondering why, or in my opinion, perhaps you were. Those are ones from the book. Again, that's meant to soften the message a bit and to make it clear that this is just the conclusion you're coming to and you're open to other interpretations. It is not the same as sounding wimpy, which would be things like, I know I'm wrong, but, or I'm calling me crazy, but I think you've been late. That's not the same thing. One is advocating for yourself. One is sort of kind of creating an environment where you're really just going to silence in your sort of passive aggressive kind of way, where the message is, what I'm saying doesn't matter because I'm the helpless victim. And when you don't recognize that's what I'm doing, I'm mad at you, and I'll talk behind your back. And then finally, encourage some testing. So you're going to end kind of all your advocacy with, am I missing anything? I'd love to hear what you think about that. Or do you think, does this capture anything? Or are there things that I didn't say? But again, that invitation. And again, this is where relationship might come into play, because if the person doesn't have a good relationship with you, they may see this as a trap of this person just wants me to affirm what they just said and then be silent. So if nobody says anything and you're noticing that it's safety, they even recommend it's your job to then also play devil's advocate with yourself. Because I was wondering, or I thought that maybe I'd be wrong because blank, blank, blank. Because again, that's one way you can kind of recreate safety while still advocating for yourself. And again, this only works effectively if your goal is to come up with a mutual purpose and to reach a mutual purpose. If you're just doing this to get your way, you could have just said, this is what I want and I demand it, and then stamp your foot or stamp your fist and see how far that gets you. Probably not very far, but I guess you could do it if your goal was really just to get what you wanted.
They talk about big, tough conversations, like telling your boss that they're micromanaging you in a way that's not quite so aggressive. But the next example they give about the person sort of not following an internal protocol, I think those are important conversations that we don't have, because thinking about PPE and the way that, so in my organization, if we're working with clients that aren't able to tolerate masks, we have extra PPE that we're supposed to wear, but it's cumbersome and it's very easy to forget about, like to forget that you need to put it on, especially if you move clients. And I think sometimes we have issues with compliance in those kinds of circumstances, because it's like, oh, well, they're going to freak out and I don't want to make them feel bad. And it's a problem. No, you can just say, I've noticed the last 3 times that I've provided supervision, you haven't had on your goggles. I'd like to work on that for the safety of ourselves, our clients, and because it's good, an internal policy that we've all agreed is important to the organization, and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But it's a hard conversation to have because it seems so petty, but it's really not. It's like an important safety issue.
Yeah. But and where's the mutual purpose is, I know we all want to keep our clients healthy and avoid more pandemic. We're all tired of that, aren't we? Would be, there you go. So hopefully you have the baseline there to engage in these kind of the state steps to kind of advocate for yourself. But then you might ask yourself, I'm just someone who I love rules and masks and I'm demanding people wear them for my own personal safety.
So,
okay, Rob. Bad situation.
So just to summarize what STATE stands for, because you did it kind of like the long version. It's share your facts, tell your story, ask for others' paths, talk tentatively, and encourage testing.
Mm-hmm.
STATE. They use this acronym a lot throughout the book.
Well, what's left of the book? Because
I guess what's left of the book. So I feel like this is an important acronym, and we had to rate the acronyms. I put this one near the top.
Yeah, though I don't think they consider this to be like the most important skill they discuss in this book, though I found it to be probably what I was most hoping for in the book, which is how do I get across what it is I'm trying to say in a way that doesn't lead to silence or violence.
Yeah.
And just recognizing that I could do that is helpful, but I think it was nice to have these steps as sort of a framework that I could follow to sort of do my best to present information in a way that is not going to come off as, end up as masking or turn into silence or turn into violence.
And that's sort of what's nice about the next 2 chapters is that it helps you, like, now you've done this, and the other person, especially if you're in a supervisor-supervisee relationship, you want to help them be able to do this as well. And they've maybe not gone into the amount of practice that you've had. And so it's a nice guide of like how to help this other person navigate a conversation and how you can respond and how you can help keep the conversation on task in like an empathetic and helpful way, rather than being like, that's not what we're talking about. You've gotten off task. No, it gives you some nice tools.
Yeah.
This whole courtroom is off task.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next chapter, it feels like the kind of the mirror reflection of state your path. So now you state your path, like, how do I make everyone state their? I want to help everyone. I had so much fun stating my path. I want you to state your path.
Well, Rob, you'll be happy to know that mirror is one of the steps in the next acronym.
No,
we're going to help them. We're going to help them. Yeah, we're going to help them get amped up.
Yes, no, mirror is in the acronym. Yes. I was like, God, I see amp. Is there amp and mirror? And how many more acronyms do we got? This book's wrapping up.
No, it's in the next acronym.
Yeah.
Which is AMP.
And much like your power tie, you've got your power listening tools, AMP, ask, mirror, paraphrase, and prime, of which I think most of these are pretty commonly used terms. Prime was one I wasn't quite sure what they meant, but it really just comes down to, and if all else fails, make a guess. Like, I'm noticing you're doing this. Is it possible? Or I'm wondering if, and then you sort of tell them like, this is what I think you would say if you were stating your.
I'm wondering if you're taking those computer parts home in your backpack. That was an example in there.
I'm wondering if you're doing that.
I'm wondering.
Right? So you know that you're not supposed to bring those home, right? Right?
It seems like what's happening. Okay.
So yeah, that it's kind of so ideally they'll then state their path appropriately. If they do not, again, you can ask them. You can mirror statements. Certainly always paraphrase. That's good empathetic listening. That's a good skill in a lot of situations, and that priming one we came up with. And again, if everyone's agreeing and they're sharing, well, not even agreeing, but they're sharing more thoughts, safety's probably there. You're all on the right path, and you can focus more on, okay, well, now we're going to come up with a strategy. That's important. And then the last chapter in this section, Retake Your Pen, really has to do with taking feedback, which that's new for the 3rd edition. I came to those later, so I didn't give them as much time as the content in the 2nd edition that we've talked about. But it really felt a little tacked on. Like, here's how to take feedback. I don't know. It's a good skill. Which there was nothing in there that was like, this is bad. I don't like this. Isn't how you take feedback. But it didn't. I didn't quite get how it gelled together. I don't know if I might have been missing something, but it did feel a little like someone wanted to hear about feedback. So here it is. We put it in the book.
I think what they needed to do was figure out, like how the end of the conversation happens. Because if you just didn't have these last 2 chapters, then you would just be like, we've had this conversation, right? Like someone else is going to give us feedback, but you haven't prepared us for what to do when it doesn't go exactly like we want, like in The Rehearsal. If you guys have seen that HBO show, you should totally watch.
Yes, that was a weird show.
I love it. I love it so much.
Did you finish it?
What?
Did you finish it? The first season? Oh, okay.
But right, so it's like how to deal with yourself, right? They've taught you how to like handle everyone else, but then this is all about you. This is your reflection chapter. And maybe that's a little harder to read too, right? Because the second edition didn't have that in there. Sorry, my contact is falling out. But I think this is the you chapter. Like, what do you do when you hear something that you don't like, or you hear something that you were surprised about, right? How do you receive it and then move forward?
Yeah, especially to be able to then make having the next crucial conversation easier because you've learned from it in the best way possible.
Right.
Oh, then in that, I don't know, maybe it should have fit into our last part, which is how to finish then. I guess it does reflect into the, your AMP and you're getting everyone to state their paths. I did like how the second edition then went into the next chapter, the first part of how to finish, which is move to action. And we're not going to go into as much detail on that, but just the idea of, great, you had this conversation. Everyone's high-fived. They feel safe. They're so excited that they got to share their, explore their shared meaning and create a great pool and have the higher middle road. And you all agreed on what comes next. But then don't forget, the chapter really has like a good, and then don't forget, write down what it is you all agreed on, set some goals, set some times, and depending on your workplace, you might also need to decide how will this decision be implemented? Because some crucial conversations are meant to get facts so that the boss can make the final decision. Some crucial conversations are meant to make everyone feel comfortable enough that, all right, as a group, we're going to now vote, and no matter what wins, everyone's happy with the options. Some crucial conversations are ones where we're not leaving until we come up with a consensus response. And then once we have that decision, regardless, okay, who's doing what, when will we check in, what are the timelines? So this chapter really just sort of, goes over, all right, what do you do now that you've had the conversation? What's the end point? Now that you have something decided, how do you then turn that into action? Which, I didn't even really think about until I got to that chapter. I was so into those, like the conversations and the examples they had. They're like, oh, and then you have to do something after the conversation is over.
I think that's such a great reminder.
It's like, oh, it's over. Well, now we got to have a plan of action going forward.
Right? I did it. Woo!
I feel so safe. I do too. Great job, everybody.
Nothing has changed.
Nope,
I think that
changed.
I will say I think that I have been fortunate in that I've had this modeled for me in places that I've worked where there are established forms if there is an issue that needs to have feedback, right? And part of that form at the end of it is what are our next steps that each of the people need to take? And let's, lay it out and have it be, behaviorally based, not just like, why don't you be better? But like, clearly something that person's going to do and a date by which they need to do it by. And then when you're in that meeting, you go ahead and schedule the follow-up meeting to the feedback meeting.
Yeah.
And then in the follow-up meeting, you're going to check and see, did everyone do their follow-up steps?
Yeah.
So I've had that model for me, but I think that, if you haven't ever seen that, you might not think to have it laid out what's going to need to happen in the future, but it's so helpful. And it takes the onus off either party to be the one that's going to initiate the action because it's all set and no one has to remember on their own.
Who does what, by when, and how will follow-up occur are the ones they lay out in the book. And then they even tell you that don't worry if people miss their deadlines and don't do these things, because guess what? It just gives you another chance to practice a crucial conversation related to their not completing the goal on time. It's a cycle.
Life's a journey. There's just so much to learn. Just keep learning.
So don't forget that. That's a good chapter for that. But again, doesn't relate necessarily to conversations, but does relate to modeling decision-making. And I did actually appreciate the questions you want to ask yourself when it comes to making decisions. One of which was, I can't remember if this was just my notes or if it's actually in the book, but who cares? Which could be, who are the stakeholders that are most interested in a solution? It could also be, this is not a decision that impacts me enough to get out of bed. So whoever wants to make the decision, I stated my path. I'm good. Whatever. just choose what you like would be one of those kind of questions about who's deciding.
They just have who with the advice that we really means not me, so we aren't going to do anything. You are going to do something and I am going to do something, and then we'll come back together.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so true that we means not me.
Yep. And then our final two chapters, which we're going to just go over incredibly quickly, would be Yeah, But, which is they just give you, if you were like, wow, I had this terrible thing happen. Great. Check the back of the book. They go over some examples of times that just seemed like there was no way out of the crucial conversation. They talked about the danger point of many of these conversations. One would be an example of, there was one I liked. It was not in the third edition. It was in the second edition of a situation where people were getting feedback, and they do the thing where they're like, yeah, but no one told me that. And not just the one time where it is, legitimately when we train people, maybe we did not specify, look at our BST model. We didn't specify exactly what needed to be done. But every time a date is missed, it's, well, I wasn't told that, or it wasn't specific enough. You didn't get to it too much. That becomes kind of a pattern, which I thought was a good example because it's one you could find yourself into. And then they talk about, okay, where's the danger? Where could things go really wrong? And then they come up with sort of a solution, in this case, focusing on patterns related to the behavior, and then how you could use your STATE acronym and STATE steps to get across the concern you have and to rebuild that mutual purpose of coming up with a resolution. Any in there before we move on that people like? I love that, and I have to say it, versus people could just check out the book if they're interested in some dire what ifs.
Yeah, I think the what ifs are nice in the book if you're going to be using it, like, as you go along and you're practicing conversations and you find yourself in a predicament. But I don't think they're necessarily important for us to review.
And then finally putting it all together, which, spoiler alert, we already talked about this throughout, which are what are the two giant take-homes from the book if you forgot everything else. And it is number one, learn to look. Keep asking, am I in dialogue or out of dialogue? Is this silence or violence? Acknowledge, even if I don't know what it is I should do, acknowledge that something's not going well and I want to somehow change the tone of the conversation. And then number two, make it safe. Recognize that it is important to allow for safety and to create safety when you are having a dialogue. And then even if you forget the exact steps of how would you create something safe, just show interest that you care about the person's responses to questions, and that if things are going really bad, you may want to apologize and take a brief time out to recreate a comfortable environment. So if you forget everything that you read or listened to about crucial conversations, learn to look, make it safe.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that this chapter has a nice table of all of their advice summarized with all the acronyms and all the steps under like the context of coaching. So this would be a good chapter if you're going to practice or implement this. This is where you want to look for don't go make a table. They have it in here for you.
Yeah. All right. Now, that's what the authors say are their main 2 points. But since this is both a book club and an episode, we'd be remiss if we didn't move into Dissemination Station. So, learn to look, make it safe. Final points from everybody after reading Crucial Conversation. Takeaways, things that you think they missed in terms of that big 2 list. Areas that you are going to be practicing tomorrow or whenever you go to work next.
My big takeaway is that do the work before you have the conversation. Don't be the person that just jumps into the conversation because you've read the book and you're ready to jump into something that may potentially be harmful for your relationship if you don't tread lightly, right? So really use time before you have that conversation to reflect, figure out what your heart is, like they said, figure out why you want to have the conversation. What's your end goal? Do you have the resources? Are you in a right place to have that without being defensive or angry, and getting yourself in the right position before you have that conversation? That's all.
Yeah, I think the silence versus violence, especially working in just sort of the era that we work in and thinking about, don't do all that prep and then be violent in your conversation with your prep. Because I think that could be a situation that people fall into of like, well, I've prepared and I know how this is going to go and we're going to make it go the way that I planned. It's not the purpose of that preparation. The purpose of that preparation is to be like a good listener and to come to like to let the other person have feedback and to recognize that they haven't prepared. And so you have to be in control of how you respond to them. So, and don't respond with silence or violence.
I think everyone has made some very important points. My point I want to make is not actually related to supervision, which might be bad since it's Supervision September, but I feel like particularly in this last chapter, there are some nice parallels that one could draw between working with clients in what we might call crucial interactions and a crucial conversation, right? Particularly these two main points. What is it? Learn to look, right? So looking to see, are you and your client sort of getting along? Do you have similar goals for the session or the time that you're together? And are you being aware of any indicators on their part of withdrawal of assent, right? Or if they're not having a good time in session, and then making it safe again. So if you're seeing that you are not driving in that way, that you back up, you don't push through whatever your agenda is, but rather you make it safe again by reestablishing that relationship so that the two of you can work towards whatever the common goal might be. So I just think that, I don't know, that might be a nice way to think about other things.
Very nice. All right, everybody. This brings us to the end of Crucial Conversations. Again, I think a book that we're all going to recommend, even though we have some qualms about some of the sections, we have some qualms about some of the tone. But in terms of content, we do agree is thumbs up for adding to not just your supervision, but possibly to your overall communication practice. But remembering that, as the authors say, the goal of this book is not to make you a great conversationalist or communicator. The goal is to develop plans and strategies for meaningful action where communication will need to be a part of that. So do keep that distinction in mind, that it's not just about, now I'm good at talking, because if all you do is talk and you forget that chapter about the make a plan or make an action plan, you're still going to find yourself not really making the progress that you want to see. Everyone, we want to say thank you so much for enjoying our Supervision September with us. We really hope you had a great time hearing our Crucial Conversations book club. I really had fun talking about supervision. We do this every September, and we hope you enjoy joining us and perhaps even getting your 3 Supervision CEs. Hey, if you just wanted to hear it to learn some new supervision, we're glad you came here for that too. We really hope you enjoyed the full episodes that we had. We'd love it if you subscribed to the show to get new episodes every single week. A couple other places you can find us. We're on all the social medias as ABA Inside Track. You can find these posts on our YouTube page with the YouTube subtitles engaged. You can go to our website, abainsidetrack.com, to find links to all the articles, books, everything we discuss, as well as our archive and places to purchase other CEs if you so desire. And of course, if you want even more ABA Inside Track, including getting 2 CEs for listening to this whole podcast for free, as well as access to all of the book clubs and many of our live episodes, also with some bonus free CEs, you can subscribe as low as $3 on our Patreon page, patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. Check it out. You can see the different tiers we offer. But at our $10 level is where we have our book club and our live episodes. But please check it out, see what tier fits you. We'd really appreciate it. And if you just want to say hi, give us some feedback, give us some thoughts, give us some topics, just write to us anytime at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. I want to make sure that everyone gets that last secret code word for the episode. It is bicep. 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 It's a muscle. I think it's in your arms. Who would know? I spend my time reading articles and recording podcasts. My mouth is the muscle I move the most, as you can tell. It's somewhere on your body, though. Bicep. All right, before we wrap up, I want to say big thanks to Dr. Jim Carr for recording our intro and outro music, to Kyle Sturry for our interstitial music, and Dan Thabit of the Podcast Doctors for our fabulous editing work. Well, even though Supervision September is all done, join us next week for another fun-filled episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye!